Hello, and thank you for watching this attempt at an AI War Fleet Command tutorial video. This is a difficult game to explain to someone who's new because the aspects of the game are connected to each other in such a way that it's difficult to explain one thing without having to refer to a lot of other things that might not have been explained yet. And this starts with the new game screen. There are a lot of options here, but for someone just starting out, I'll go through what's the most beginner friendly. It's best to make sure that the minor factions are turned off, even the ones that are helpful, because this will help you get a feel for the basics of the game before you start to modify them. Same goes for AI plots. I recommend turning those off at first. And for ships, I think that normal is good for getting a decent range of possibilities without being overwhelmed. And now that most of the nastier things are in complex, you can leave all the options on with normal available ships, I think. Also, I recommend leaving auto AI progress off when you're just learning the game. There are plenty of ways that the AI makes sure that you shouldn't waste time, believe me. The map design is not a huge deal, in my opinion. I do recommend for difficulty not going higher than 7 for your first time playing the game. And it depends on your level of comfort. You may want to change it as you gain a bit more experience. 7 is when the AI gains all of its basic functions, and I think that's an okay starting point if you're familiar with this type of game. And stick with vanilla. There are a lot of interesting things you can try, but when you're just learning, it's probably better to keep the special abilities to a minimum. And 80 planets is the default. I think it's a decent way to start. It gives an idea of forming bigger strategies. If it seems a little overwhelming, saying it to 70 or 60 is okay, but don't go lower than that. Because when there are very few planets, then different difficulties can show up. Well, as for choosing a home planet, there are two things to remember. First of all, while there are benefits to picking a more central planet with a lot of links to it, for someone who's starting out with the game, it's best to choose something really defensible, like, say, this one here. And you can right-click a planet to just outright choose what kind of bonus ship you get. While there are a lot of fun things you can do with these options, I think that for a beginner, it's tough to go wrong with the Sentinel frigate. It has effectively unlimited range, it has decent power, and it requires a minimum of babysitting or attention. Well, let's take a look at what happens when we start this game. Very first thing to do, and the very first thing I'm going to talk about, is the pause key. There are a lot of advantages you can gain from using it. The game is basically designed around the assumption that the player will pause every time they want to examine something or execute something that's complicated. Even in multiplayer games that I've been in, at least, either one of us will say, hey, I need to pause to do such and such, and there's nothing wrong with it. We just say okay. We understand what it's like. Now, for basic controls, there's a sort of controls window down here, and while there are some useful things in here, the first thing to do is to take a look at the controls that you get from pressing the escape button, which is a different window entirely. This is actually quite a lot to absorb at once, and for some of these commands, the game isn't obvious about what happens, like what free roaming defender mode means. Most of the commands are self-explanatory though, including how to control the camera without using the mouse, very handy for those laptop users, and a couple that I want to explain myself because the control screen is a tiny bit lacking. One of them is the alt-right click mode, which is a context-sensitive menu. And I'm going to demonstrate this by one of my favorite functions of this, which is line placement. So, for example, let's say I want to make a minefield that moves from this wormhole to my home command station. Well, I select the minefield, then I alt-right click, and then there's line placement. And here you can use the options excuse me, to place however you like, decide how many things you're going to place at once, how dense you want it to be, and what I recommend is just picking any place easy to remember from the wormhole and lining it up with the similar orientation to the target. There you go. Toggle packed line, I find that works pretty well. And line it up. There we go. Once these mines are built, anything that comes in is going to just go straight through all these minefields before they reach the target. The other thing that I want to talk about as far as obscure commands go is the K command, which causes things to stand down. Now I'll just produce a couple of things just so I can demonstrate the effect of it. Now it's a little tough to see, but if I press K, the graphic will darken a bit, both in zoomed in and zoomed out mode. And what this means is that the ship will not fire on anything. It doesn't actually save any energy, but it is useful in a few situations, such as when you don't want a cloaked ship to reveal itself by firing, and that includes military ships that are being cloaked by an outside cloaker starship or assault transports. And it's also useful when something has a long reload time and you don't want it to shoot until it reaches some target you have. Then you press K, move it over, target the thing, and then press K again, and none of the shots will be wasted. Well, let's talk a little bit about research. Now, there are a lot of options here, of course, but there's a few things to remember. Fleet ships, starships, turrets are all fairly obvious power-ups when you use your knowledge to create new things because, well, you get a new type of thing to field and new options for yourself. But I find that some of the most powerful options are in the econ and support tabs. So take a close look at those, especially the command stations. And while it looks like a good idea to unlock better metal harvesters, I find that you actually get more metal and more overall benefit if you're playing alone from unlocking an orbital command station with the same knowledge. Economic type, I mean. The others, the military, has some very obvious and powerful uses. The logistical is... I'm not quite at the skill level where I can make good use of that, but I've heard of other people who can. It may be worth making a game just to play around with or at least a lot of the options available to you. Another thing to remember is that research, for the most part, is not so much a tech tree as a tech line for each particular thing you want to research. Now, an upgrade from Mark 1 to Mark 2 is fairly efficient knowledge-wise, and it effectively triples the amount of ship power you can get from that particular type, because you get a new capture ships and the new ones are twice as powerful as the old ones. I don't recommend unlocking a Mark III because the power increase is smaller, unless you have an advanced factory, but that's something I'm not going to discuss just yet. Support has a lot of options related to mobility and convenience, and these sort of things. For example, the mobile space dock can build fleet ships very quickly on a battlefield, which has pretty obvious benefits to it. Force fields are obviously very helpful for surviving. Assault transports are extremely useful for a lot of things, and well, you also have quite a few powerful options by default under the econ construction and support. Engineers don't help you mine anything faster like resource collectors do in more conventional real-time strategy games. They're mostly helpful for helping you to spend your money faster, or by money I mean metal, but this is very helpful when you want to, say, build a new set of defenses very quickly when something is on its way. And just for not wasting too much time when you want to build or rebuild a fleet. Speaking of which, this game has a repeating loop queue option, much like other flow games like Supreme Commander, where it does not stop building ships until you either run out of metal or you simply cannot build anymore due to energy or ship capacity limits. Now, I probably should have mentioned this a little earlier, but let's go over AI progress. Now, it seems like a fairly nebulous thing of how much is too much, and the reason is that it varies depending on the difficulty. In general, an increase of 100 is a fairly big deal, so be wary of anything that increases AI progress by that amount or more. And that includes taking 5 planets. Now, the game tells you when the AI moves to the next tech level threshold, but that's not the whole story. It gradually unlocks new types of ships for itself, and it increases the amount of ships that it sends at you or reinforces itself with. So there's more than just, in this case, the 230, 730, and 1130 barriers here. In general, if AI progress doesn't feel like a particularly big deal, you're probably not playing at a high enough difficulty. I find that the game is most enjoyable when it keeps you sort of at the edge of your skill, where decisions really matter, and a good or a bad one seriously affects your possibility of success. Whew. And all this without leaving my home world. Now, this map screen is where most of the big decisions are made. This is where the most important things happen. But you can't really make very good decisions without knowing what's out there, and that's where scouts come in. Now, if you want to scout a lot, and most people do, there are a few things that you can do right at the start. One useful, though expensive option is to build Mark I scout ships right away. And the reason that this is helpful is that they can greatly increase the distance by which you can scout. They're also immune to counter spies, which a certain AI likes to use. So I'll give a quick demonstration here. Now, the planets next to you, next to your starting homeworld, don't have any cloaking detection, so you can scout those pretty much at will. Further than that, and you're going to lose scouts along the way. It's best to keep them grouped together and to hold G for group move as you assign a path for them, because scouts help keep each other hidden. This is so that one detector won't uncover them all and stop your scouting raid at the second planet. I recommend setting a really long path just in case you luck out and get a couple of wormholes that are right next to each other. It's much better to go too far than not far enough. And this is how you will gain insight into what you can aim for. As for what's important and what isn't, well, this is where I come into another difficulty of running a tutorial for this game, which is a good portion of the fun is in discovering things. However, if you don't really know where to begin, it can be tough to get to the point where you start enjoying this process. What I'd say is this game gives very good descriptions of how things work once you scout them out. What I can do is show you a good way to interpret the information that the game gives you when you hover the mouse over something. Now, the general description is very good for describing ships that have special abilities or need to be used with a lot of care. But another thing to bear in mind is the hull and the attack multipliers. There are also some other important things like range. You can hold Z to take a look at like, here are the attack ranges here. My apologies. I'm sort of doing this live and... well, anyway. The attack multipliers determine what the ship is good or bad at attacking. Most multipliers are positive, but some of them are... well, okay, all multipliers are positive, but some of them are fractions, which means it's weak against that sort of thing. Now, in the case of this missile frigate, it's strong against things like light, swarmer, ultralight, and a couple of more exotic things. This kind of gives the impression that the ship is strong against small ships that like to swarm you. But not all small ships like that have a hull type that's weak against missile frigates, so take a look at the hulls of things that you haven't seen before so you can decide what's strong against it. And to give further explanation, the hull type determines what can attack it effectively or not. So for example, this bomber has a bonus against artillery type, so it's strong against enemy missile frigates. Now there are some kinds of ships, like the Sentinel frigate, that doesn't have any attack multipliers at all. And this usually means one of two things. Either it's an all-purpose ship designed to be able to hit anything decently well, or its raw attack power is not really the main point of the ship, and it's mainly useful for its special abilities. Actually, I might be jumping forward a little bit. A space dock makes fleet ships. These are small, fairly cheap, fairly expendable things. Starship Constructor makes starships, which are big, expensive, usually not quite as specialized as fleet ships, and can do some unique things. However, you need to watch these carefully because they take a long time and a fair amount of resources to build. Well, a few other things. turrets. Now, defending yourself is about half the game and alone could constitute a series of tutorial videos, but in short, turrets tend to have really good range and power and durability for their cost. The main drawback is that they cost a lot of energy to put down say, a full planet's worth of defenses. Another thing is that unlike mobile ships, their capacity is per planet rather than per, well, everything. Except for heavy beam cannons. But don't let that put you off using heavy beam cannons. They're absolute beasts. I'm not joking. Well, also defending yourself and attacking kind of blend in together, at least partially because of these fellows right here, mobile builders. If your planet is next to, if a planet you control is next to a planet you don't, you can build a mobile builder and send it over, and you can put turrets on their planet. This is really effective in a lot of ways, especially if you expect the AI to bring a counterattack. Now, I want to end this tutorial, this very short and woefully incomplete tutorial, with a quick look at the stats screen. This is useful to a beginner, mostly for the objective screen, which will help you get an idea of what to look for first, and resource flows, which allow you to see where your metal and energy is coming from and what's consuming it, so that if you start to build something really big and then forget about it, you can use this to find out where the big drain is, go to that planet, and put something on hold if you have to. Now, I'd like to go into the details of attacking or defending fairly soon, like in my next couple of videos, but this should be enough of an info dump for now, and it has a couple of homework assignments. Take a look at this control screen, get a decent idea of what most of the commands do. A lot of them are really big time savers once you get used to them. Also, take a look at this control screen, which gives you some options to make certain things faster. I find that most people have different taste on what they want to be done automatically and what they don't, and also depends on what they tend to research in the game. I know I'm telling you to do a lot of this stuff yourself, but I honestly cannot explain everything in a reasonable amount of time. Probably the best way to learn this game is to have a friend who plays AI War, play it yourself, and then talk to this friend every once in a while to see what you can learn, what could be improved on, and who knows, maybe they'll learn from you. Problem is, most people, or at least a lot of people, don't have friends who play AI War, since it's a fairly niche game, not very well known. That's kind of a shame, but what can you do? Well, I think that's it for now. I hope you enjoy exploring things, and I'll go into a little more detail in the next couple of videos. See you then.